The wind cut sharply through the narrow streets of downtown Chicago as 12-year-old. Emily walked with small, hurried steps, trying to keep warm in her thin, worn-out coat. Holiday lights glowed from every corner, casting bright reflections on the icy sidewalks. But none of that brightness reached her eyes. She clutched a tiny velvet box close to her chest, shielding it from the cold, as if the warmth of her hands could protect the memory inside. For the past week, she had watched her mother grow quieter, more exhausted, skipping meals so Emily could have the little they had. Their pantry shelves had been empty for 2 days, and the last dollars in her mother's wallet had gone to rent. That morning, Emily heard her mother break down in the kitchen, whispering to herself that she didn't know how to feed her daughter anymore. The sound had hurt more than hunger ever could. Inside, the velvet box rested her late father's silver pocket watch, her only treasure, the last piece of him she had kept since he passed away 4 years earlier. It wasn't just metal or memory. It was her promise to him. But hunger and cold don't negotiate with promises. And the tremble in her mother's voice had pushed her to make a decision far too heavy for someone her age. She had left the apartment quietly, hoping her mother wouldn't notice. The watch could bring money. Enough, she prayed, for bread, milk, maybe even a warm dinner. She finally reached the small, antique shop tucked between a bakery and a bookstore. Its windows were fogged, the open sign flickering as if uncertain. Emily stepped inside, and the soft chime of the doorbell echoed through the quiet shop. Rows of old clocks, dusty paintings, and tarnished jewelry surrounded her like silent witnesses. The elderly shopkeeper looked up from behind the counter. His grey eyebrows lifted slightly when he saw the young girl standing alone. Emily approached the counter and placed the velvet box down with shaky fingers. She explained softly that she needed to sell it. The shopkeeper opened the box, and his eyes narrowed with interest, then shifted almost reluctantly, as if he knew its value yet chose to pretend ignorance. He offered her only a few bills. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat and accepted. She needed food, not fairness. She walked out into the cold again, unaware that a black luxury SUV was parked across the street, and the man inside had witnessed everything. Adrian Grant had always considered himself a man immune to sentiment. As the billionaire CEO of Grant Holdings, he had negotiated with presidents, overpowered ruthless competitors, and built an empire that stretched across half the states. But as he sat in the back seat of his SUV that evening, waiting for a conference call to begin, something unusual caught his eye. A young girl slipping into an antique shop, clutching a velvet box as if it were the last piece of hope she possessed. There was a hesitance in her steps, a vulnerability that pulled his attention despite himself. He watched through the frosted window as she emerged again minutes later, her small hands holding a few crumpled bills. Even from a distance, he could read the defeat in her posture. Adrian's jaw tightened. He recognized that expression. He had once worn it himself as a boy, when he and his mother were barely surviving. People had taken advantage of them too, preying on their desperation. He couldn't stand the sight of it happening again. Without thinking, he stepped out of the SUV and walked toward the antique shop. The bell chimed sharply as he pushed open the door. The shopkeeper looked up, startled to see a tall, sharply dressed man with a commanding presence walk in. Adrian didn't waste time with pleasantries. His voice was calm, but each word carried an edge of authority. As he asked about the item the girl had just sold, the shopkeeper hesitated, stuttering as he tried to invent a lie. But Adrian's stare left no room for dishonesty. Finally, with a nervous sigh, the man retrieved the velvet box from under the counter and placed it before him. Adrian opened it slowly. Inside lay a silver pocket watch, simple, elegant, but clearly cherished. What froze him was the delicate engraving inside the cover. "To Emily, my brightest star, love, Dad." A subtle ache pressed against his chest. This wasn't something a child should ever have to give up. Without another word, Adrian pulled out his checkbook and paid the full value, $10,000. The shopkeeper's eyes widened, but Adrian's expression remained unreadable. He stepped back into the cold, scanning the street until he spotted the girl, standing in front of a small grocery store. counting her few dollars with visible worry. As snowflakes drifted around her, Adrian felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't allowed in years. He knew he couldn't drive away. He had seen too much already.